Hello, I found your wallet.
Stay where you are.
Black cleaner calls the millionaire COTO return his lost wallet, unaware it was a test. The moment Loretta picked up that wallet, she didn't realize she'd just stepped into a millionaire's experiment. $10,000, one phone call, and a voice on the other end that sounded less grateful than dangerous. Because when Cardone Kirk said, "Stay where you are," it wasn't a thank you. It was the beginning of a test she was never meant to survive. Ever wonder if your next good deed might be the one that changes everything, or costs you everything? Stay subscribed. Because the next story might prove that integrity isn't just a virtue, it's a risk. Loretta Rodriguez's world existed between silence and shine. Every night after the executives of Kirk Enterprises vanished into their luxury sedans, she stayed behind, mopping floors that reflected the city skyline better than any mirror. The air always smelled faintly of lemon polish and ambition. At 32, she'd grown used to being invisible in places like this. She worked 2 cleaning jobs to keep her mother's dialysis bills paid and squeezed in architecture classes at night. Her dream was simple: build homes for people who couldn't afford them. People like her. Her reflection, faint in the glass wall of the 51st floor, looked like someone else's life, one built from fatigue and faith. Her father's voice still echoed whenever she felt worn down. "Don't trade your peace for someone else's pocket, baby girl." It was close to midnight when she moved into the corner office, Cardone Kirk's office. Everyone at Kirk Enterprises knew the name. A real estate tycoon with a reputation colder than his glass tower, rumored to have built half the city and broken twice as many souls doing it. The kind of man who didn't lose things. Except tonight, he had. The wallet lay near the leg of his desk, a sleek black rectangle of Italian leather that seemed to hum under the fluorescent light. Loretta crouched down, brushing dust from its surface. It was heavy, expensive, alive with the kind of wealth she'd never touched. She opened it, just enough to breathe in the shock. $10,000 in crisp hundreds, a black platinum card, and an ID. Cardone Kirk. The money alone could pay her mother's hospital fees for 6 months. It could buy her freedom from exhaustion. The temptation wasn't cinematic. It was quiet and rational. Just one thought: who would ever know? Her heartbeat said otherwise. Integrity didn't come cheap, but it came from her father, and that made it priceless. She closed the wallet with trembling fingers. The air in the office suddenly felt too still. A business card peeked from one of the leather folds, thick, cream-colored, embossed with a single number and a silver K. Loretta hesitated only a moment before picking up her phone. The line rang once. "This is Kirk." The voice was low, controlled, and uncomfortably close, like it knew her already. Her mouth went dry. "Mr. Kirk, this is Loretta Rodriguez. I work in building maintenance. I found your wallet in your office tonight." A pause, thick and assessing. "Did you open it?" She swallowed. "Only enough to know it was yours." "I see." His voice softened, but not kindly. "Stay where you are, Ms. Rodriguez. Someone will come for it." The line went dead. Loretta stared at her reflection in the floor's mirrored marble. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, and not in a way she liked. Within minutes, the elevator chimed. A man in a black suit stepped out, wordless, expression blank. He held out his hand. She placed the wallet in it. He nodded once and left. As the elevator doors closed, Loretta realized this wasn't gratitude. It was surveillance. And somewhere in the dark above her, a man she'd never met was already watching her next move. That night didn't end in relief. It began a sequence. By morning, Loretta received an email she wasn't supposed to see. Subject: Executive Interview, Floor 51. 9 a.m. attendance mandatory. She hadn't realized yet, the wallet wasn't lost. It was bait. And she had just proven herself worthy of something far more dangerous than money. Loretta barely slept. Her dreams blurred with the hum of the city and the echo of Cardone Kirk's voice. Stay where you are. It wasn't a request. It had been an order. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the reflection of that man in her mind, though she'd never seen his face, only heard his tone, calm enough to chill the blood. By morning, exhaustion had settled deep in her bones. She showered, dressed for her next shift, and tried to convince herself that the previous night was over. She had done the right thing. The wallet was returned. The test, if that's what it was finished. Then her phone buzzed. Subject, HR, Executive Instruction Message. Report to Floor 51, Executive Suite. 9 a.m. sharp. No greeting. No signature. Just that single line. Loretta stared at it, heart hammering. Cleaners didn't go to Floor 51. That level was reserved for the top brass, executives, investors, the kind of people whose shoes she polished without ever meeting their eyes. She almost ignored it. Almost. But something inside her, a mix of curiosity and defiance, compelled her to go. By 8:55, she was standing in the mirrored elevator, uniform pressed, badge trembling in her palm. Each ding of ascending floors felt heavier than the last. When the doors opened onto the top level, the air itself changed, crisper, colder, quieter. A receptionist in muted gray looked up. Ms. Rodriguez. Loretta nodded. Mr. Kirk is expecting you. The words made her throat dry. She followed the woman down a hallway lined with glass offices, her footsteps muffled by thick carpeting. At the end stood a set of double doors, frosted glass etched with a silver insignia, Kirk Enterprises. The receptionist pushed them open and gestured her inside. The office was vast, minimalist, and intimidating. Chrome accents, dark marble, walls of glass framing the skyline. It was a space built to remind anyone inside it of their smallness. Cardone Kirk stood by the window, hands in his pockets, staring at the city below like he owned not just the view, but everything in it. He turned when she entered. Up close, he was disarmingly composed. Early 40s, tall, sharply dressed, the kind of man whose silence carried more authority than most people's shouting. His eyes, gray like uncut steel, fixed on her. Ms. Rodriguez. Her name in his mouth felt heavier than it should. Sir, she managed, trying not to wring her hands. He gestured toward the seat across from his desk. Sit. She obeyed. He didn't immediately speak. He simply studied her, as though she were a problem to be solved, or a riddle he already knew the answer to. Finally, he said, "You found something that didn't belong to you." "Yes, sir." "And you chose to return it?" "Yes." He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Why?" The question wasn't curious, it was clinical. She blinked. Because it was the right thing to do. That's a vague reason. Her chest tightened. Because it wasn't mine. A flicker, something unreadable, crossed his face. Maybe approval. Maybe disappointment. He turned toward the window again. Do you know how many people have worked in this building in the past 5 years? No, sir. 243. Do you know how many have passed a test of integrity when given the chance? She frowned slightly. Test. He looked over his shoulder at her, lips curving faintly, not quite a smile. You think I lose things by accident, Ms. Rodriguez? A cold current moved through her. He'd left the wallet on purpose. She sat straighter, her pulse sharp in her ears. You were testing me. I was testing everyone, he corrected. But only you called. He crossed to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out an envelope. For a moment, Loretta thought it might contain cash, a reward. But when he slid it across the polished surface, she saw the company letterhead. Her name was printed neatly across the top. She unfolded it. Position, Personal Executive Aide, Temporary Contract. Her eyes darted back to him. "This isn't necessary, Mr. Kirk. I didn't do it for money," he interrupted, voice low but edged. "That's exactly why you're sitting here." "I'm a cleaner," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I don't belong up here." Kirk leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Integrity doesn't belong anywhere, Ms. Rodriguez. That's what makes it valuable." She stared at the document. It was absurd. Yet, behind the absurdity, a whisper of temptation flickered again. Her mother's latest hospital bill still sat unopened on her kitchen table. The deadline was next week. As if sensing her hesitation, Kirk added, "You'd report directly to me. Short-term assignment. I need someone I can trust. You've already proven you fit that criteria." There was something dangerous in how he said it, an intensity that made her both nervous and curious. She asked, "Why me?" He studied her for a long moment. "Because you didn't flinch." Loretta signed before she could think too long about it. Her hand shook only slightly. When she slid the paper back to him, his gaze lingered, not on the document, but on her. "Welcome to the top floor, Ms. Rodriguez." She nodded, rising from her chair. "Thank you, sir." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "One more thing." She looked back. "You've already passed one test." His expression softened into something almost human. "Let's see if you pass another." The words followed her all the way down the elevator shaft, echoing louder than the hum of machinery. She didn't know yet whether she'd been offered an opportunity, or stepped into a trap that had been waiting with her name on it. Ever had someone hand you an opportunity that felt too precise, too convenient? Power never gives without expecting something back. Stay subscribed, because next time life tests you like this, you'll want to know how it ends before it begins. The first thing Loretta learned about working for Cardone Kirk was that silence had rules. It wasn't just quiet in his office, it was orchestrated. The kind of silence that demanded precision, that wrapped around you until you started measuring your own breathing to make sure you weren't too loud for the walls. Her first week as his personal executive aide was less of a job and more of a ritual. Every morning began at 6:45 a.m., no earlier, no later. The elevator opened to the top floor like clockwork, and by the time she reached his desk, fresh coffee, black and steaming, was already waiting. Kirk never asked for it. He simply expected it. Loretta learned quickly that expectation was his language. The suite itself was breathtaking, but sterile. A museum of order, everything glass, chrome, and reflection. The skyline stretched endlessly beyond the panoramic windows, a cruel reminder of how far above the world they stood. And yet, somehow, she felt trapped in it. It was a glass cage disguised as success. Kirk's work rhythm was relentless. He spoke in clipped sentences, as if every word had to earn its keep. Meetings were lined up like soldiers, no laughter, no small talk. When he did speak to her, it was never personal, only procedural. Yet beneath the surface of his composure, Loretta sensed something almost mechanical. He was too precise, too deliberate. Even his handwriting looked engineered. By the third day, she realized he was testing her again. He'd leave private contracts open on his desk, conveniently unattended when she entered. Handwritten memos half-tucked beneath folders, bearing numbers and names that could ruin reputations if seen by the wrong eyes. Once, she noticed a document labeled "Confidential Acquisition, Fall River Housing," left carelessly beside her cleaning schedule. Her stomach had dropped. That project was rumored to involve the displacement of hundreds of low-income families. She'd written a college essay condemning it 2 years earlier. Was it coincidence, or bait? Loretta never touched the files. She didn't even glance twice. She only adjusted the papers so they lay perfectly aligned, wiped the desk, and left. If he wanted to test her integrity again, she wasn't going to give him a different answer. But she felt his eyes on her often. From behind his computer screen, from the reflection in the glass, from the polished elevator doors that mirrored her movements. Cardone Kirk didn't have to speak to control a room. He simply existed inside it, and the air recalibrated itself around him. One evening, near closing, the city beyond the windows glowed in gold and violet. Loretta gathered her notes and prepared to leave when his voice cut through the quiet. "Sit down." It wasn't sharp, just firm enough to pin her in place. She turned. Kirk stood near the window again, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows. It was the first time she'd seen him without the armor of formality. His expression was unreadable, his eyes distant as he watched the city lights pulse like slow heartbeats below. "You've been here a week," he said finally. "Any thoughts?" She hesitated. "On the job, sir?" He nodded once. "It's organized," she said cautiously. "Too organized." "I didn't say that." "But you thought it." She met his gaze, steady. "I think you like control, Mr. Kirk. Some people build walls out of fear. You build yours out of glass." He turned then, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something human behind his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or amusement. "Interesting observation," he said quietly. "And what do you think I'm afraid of?" She hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Losing the one thing you can't buy, trust." He didn't move for a long moment. Then he walked closer, stopping just short of her chair. The air seemed to thicken between them, heavy with the scent of cologne and something unspoken. "People only tell the truth," he said softly, "when they think I can't use it against them." The statement landed like a confession disguised as cynicism. Loretta met his gaze, unflinching. "Then you've never been told the truth by someone who doesn't fear you." Silence. For a heartbeat, she thought she might have gone too far. But instead of anger, something else flashed across his face, something almost like wonder. Then, for the first time since she'd met him, Cardone Kirk smiled. It wasn't a business smile, or the cold smirk she'd seen on his magazine covers. It was brief, faint, but real, an involuntary reaction that made him seem, if only for a second, startlingly human. "Careful, Ms. Rodriguez," he murmured. "That kind of honesty could be dangerous up here." "I'm used to dangerous places," she replied softly. "They're the only ones that ever need cleaning." He studied her again, but this time, the silence wasn't about power, it was about curiosity. After a long pause, he said, "You can go home." Loretta gathered her things and left, her pulse still echoing from that small, disarming smile. As the elevator doors closed around her, she caught one last glimpse of him through the reflection. Cardone Kirk, standing in his glass cage, staring not at the skyline, but at the empty chair she'd just left behind. And for reasons she couldn't name, the sight made her heart ache. It started with whispers. Loretta noticed them the moment she entered the office on Monday morning. Hushed conversations that broke off the second she walked past, eyes that lingered too long before darting away. The rhythm of the building had changed. It felt tighter, brittle. Her desk on the executive floor had never felt so exposed. At first, she tried to ignore it. She'd grown up learning how to tune out judgment, the side glances when her accent slipped, the subtle shift in tone when people realized she wasn't just the cleaner anymore. But this was different. This felt targeted. By noon, she understood why. An email, anonymous, appeared in her inbox. No subject line. No text. Just a single PDF attachment titled, "Who She Really Is." Her hand trembled slightly as she clicked it open. Hospital invoices. Tuition debts. Her mother's diagnosis letter, complete with payment overdue notices. Even the late-night loan request she'd sent 2 months ago, the one she'd never told anyone about. Every private piece of her life, weaponized. The air left her lungs. She knew exactly who'd done it. Marcus, one of the administrative aides she'd replaced during Kirk's staff reshuffle. He'd resented her from day one, muttering about diversity hires when he thought she couldn't hear. She hadn't taken the bait. But now, it seemed he'd found another way to make her pay. Still, there was no proof. No name on the email. Just exposure, cold, raw, humiliating. She deleted it, straightened her posture, and tried to focus on work. But Kirk's assistant, a tall man named Jordan, appeared an hour later. "Mr. Kirk wants to see you," he said. Her stomach sank. The elevator ride to floor 51 felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, the suite was eerily quiet. Kirk stood by the window again, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. "Close the door," he said without turning. She obeyed. For a long moment, he said nothing. The silence between them stretched taut, heavy with something unspoken. Finally, he turned. "Why didn't you tell me your mother's dying?" The question hit her like a slap. Her throat tightened. "Excuse me." "You heard me." His tone was calm, almost gentle, which only made it worse. "You've been juggling 2 jobs and night classes while supporting an ailing parent. You could have told me." Her palms went clammy. "That's my personal life, Mr. Kirk. Not company business." His eyes hardened. "Everything connected to my employees is company business, especially when I trust them with mine." There it was again, that word, trust. It was supposed to sound noble, but from his mouth, it felt like surveillance with a smile. Loretta's voice shook, but not from fear. "You had no right to look into me." "I didn't have to," he said, stepping closer. "Someone else already did." Her breath caught. So he knew. "Then why call me up here? To humiliate me again?" she snapped. He stared at her, unreadable, infuriatingly calm. "To understand you." Something inside her cracked. "You want to understand me? Then stop trying to own the pieces of me you didn't earn." The words hung in the air between them, echoing against the glass. Kirk's expression flickered. Surprise? Pain? She couldn't tell. He looked away first. "You can go," he said quietly. "Take the rest of the day off." She wanted to slam the door behind her, but instead she left in silence, her dignity the only armor she had left. That night, as she sat in her mother's dim hospital room, Loretta tried to breathe through the anger. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors was oddly comforting, predictable, unlike the chaos in her head. Her mother was asleep, fragile but peaceful. Loretta reached out and smoothed her hair. "You deserve better than me cleaning floors at midnight," she whispered. Her phone buzzed. A message from the hospital billing department. "Outstanding balance. Cleared." Loretta's heart stopped. She scrolled, reread, blinked. Cleared. All of it. Her eyes burned with tears that were equal parts relief and fury. There was only one man powerful enough, and arrogant enough, to do that. The next morning, she didn't wait for an invitation. She marched straight into Kirk's office before anyone could stop her. He was already there, of course, seated behind his immaculate desk, flipping through papers like she wasn't a storm standing in front of him. "You paid my mother's hospital bill," she said. It wasn't a question. He didn't even look up. "I did." "Why?" He set the papers down and finally met her eyes. "Because I could." That's not an answer. His gaze was sharp, but not cruel. "It's not charity, Ms. Rodriguez. It's investment." The word stung. Investment. He leaned back in his chair, voice smooth as glass. "You said you wanted to build homes for people who can't afford them. You have potential. I don't waste potential." She laughed bitterly. "So my mother's health is a business decision now?" "I don't separate business from life," he replied. "Neither should you." Loretta stepped closer, her anger trembling beneath the surface. "You think you can buy trust, Mr. Kirk. You can't. You can only earn it." He tilted his head slightly. "And yet, you're still standing here." That stopped her cold. He was right, she hadn't quit. She wanted to. Every instinct screamed to walk away, to reclaim her dignity. But the truth was brutal. She needed the job. Needed the money. Needed the hope that maybe, just maybe, he was wrong about her price. She swallowed hard. You don't know me. Kirk's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. No. But I'm beginning to. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them changed, heavy with anger, exhaustion, and something else neither dared name. Attraction, maybe. Or recognition. Loretta broke first. She turned sharply and left the office, her footsteps echoing down the hall like accusations. In the elevator, she pressed her back against the mirrored wall and closed her eyes. Her reflection stared back, a woman caught between pride and survival. She hated that he'd seen through her walls. She hated more that he'd helped her anyway. The doors closed, and the last thing she saw before they sealed was Kirk standing at his window again, watching her leave, not with victory, but with something far more dangerous. Regret. One file. One leak. And suddenly, your whole life belongs to someone else. Think no one's watching? They already are. Stay subscribed before your next secret turns into someone's leverage. The invitation came in an envelope so heavy it could have doubled as a weapon. Inside was a single card embossed in gold, the Halden Estate, Annual Investors Gala. Beneath the elegant script, in Kirk's unmistakable handwriting, were 5 words that made Loretta's pulse quicken. You will accompany me tonight. It wasn't a request. By 8 p.m., Loretta stood before the full-length mirror in her company-issued apartment. The dress that had arrived with the invitation, silk, black, sleeveless, fit her too perfectly to be coincidence. Her reflection looked like a stranger, polished, composed, expensive. But beneath the gloss, her stomach churned. She wasn't supposed to look like this. She wasn't supposed to belong here. The car waiting downstairs was silent but luxurious, its driver stone-faced. The city lights streaked past the tinted windows like gold ribbons cutting through darkness. Each mile toward the estate felt like crossing an invisible border between worlds, hers and his. When she arrived, the Halden mansion gleamed like a cathedral of glass and chandeliers. Inside, laughter floated through the corridors, polished and false. Waiters glided between billionaires holding champagne flutes that cost more than her month's rent. And there, at the top of the marble staircase, stood Cardone Kirk. Tall, severe, immaculate in a tailored charcoal suit. His presence was gravitational, commanding attention without demanding it. When he saw her, something in his gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. You clean up well, Ms. Rodriguez, he murmured as she approached. Loretta managed a steady voice. You say that like you didn't plan every thread of it. His lips curved, but his eyes didn't smile. Observation, not flattery. He offered his arm. She hesitated, then took it, because refusing would draw more attention than accepting. As they descended into the main hall, conversations dimmed. Heads turned. The whispers began. Who's that? She's not one of us. Cardone's new assistant, I think. She must be very trusted to be here. The last word stung. Trusted. The same word he always used when he meant watched. Kirk leaned slightly toward her, voice low enough for only her to hear. Ignore them. That's easy for you to say, she replied quietly. You built the room. I'm just trying not to knock over the furniture. He chuckled under his breath, a rare, disarming sound that almost made her forget where she was. The night moved like a play. Investors, mayors, foreign partners, everyone wanted Kirk's attention. And yet, he kept Loretta close, never letting her drift too far. When introductions came, his words cut through the chatter like glass. This is Loretta Rodriguez, he said smoothly. My most trusted aide. The room stilled for a beat. Most trusted. It was both an announcement and a provocation. Loretta felt the weight of the eyes on her, curiosity from some, disdain from others. In their world, a woman like her didn't stand beside a man like him unless there was more than professionalism involved. She smiled politely, but her heart pounded. "You enjoy making scenes, don't you?" she muttered once they moved on. "Truth rarely blends in," Kirk said, taking a sip of champagne. "It's more fun when it doesn't." She didn't know whether to be flattered or furious. Dinner was a blur of courses and conversations she barely followed. Talk of mergers, real estate ventures, art auctions. Kirk navigated each topic with surgical precision, occasionally glancing her way as if to ensure she was still breathing. But every time their eyes met, the noise faded. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was tension, the kind that demanded resolution. When dessert was served, Loretta excused herself for air. The balcony overlooked the city, a sprawl of light and motion far below. The wind carried the faint hum of traffic, the pulse of the life she used to know. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she could almost breathe again. Then his voice came from behind her. "Running away already?" Loretta turned. Kirk leaned against the doorframe, champagne glass in hand, the city lights painting sharp edges across his features. "I needed a moment where I wasn't a headline," she said. He stepped closer, the air thickening between them. "You're handling it well. Most people break under this kind of scrutiny." "Maybe because I'm used to being watched," she said. "I just never knew it could be so elegant." He studied her face, expression unreadable. "Do you trust me yet?" The question landed like a blade wrapped in velvet. Loretta met his gaze. "I trust myself around you. That's enough." Something flickered in his eyes, approval, maybe even respect. Then he smiled, slow and deliberate. "Careful, Ms. Rodriguez. That kind of confidence is dangerous." She turned back toward the city, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. So is testing people who didn't ask to be tested. When she looked back, he was gone. Hours later, she returned to her apartment, still humming with the quiet energy of the night. The dress hung loosely now, the glamour fading into exhaustion. She poured herself a glass of water, then froze. A faint red light blinked in the corner of the ceiling. At first, she thought it was a smoke detector. But as she stepped closer, the truth cut through her like ice. A camera. Small, discreet, almost invisible, but not invisible enough. Her chest tightened. She scanned the room, spotting another near the bookshelf, one above the kitchen counter. Her skin crawled. He was watching her, even here. She sat on the edge of the bed, the silence deafening. Maybe it had been there since the beginning. Maybe this was his idea of trust, measured in footage, not faith. Her reflection stared back from the dark window, eyes haunted. For the first time, she couldn't tell if she was looking at herself, or at the woman he was slowly molding her into. Part of his world, or part of his experiment. The line between the two was fading fast. Ever thought you were free, only to realize every step was being watched? Control doesn't always wear chains. Sometimes it wears charm. Subscribe to never miss stories that show how close control and care can look, until it's too late. The elevator ride to the 51st floor felt like a climb through anger itself. Every floor that flashed past seemed to feed the fire in Loretta's chest. By the time the doors slid open to the polished steel and glass of Cardone Kirk's office suite, she was no longer trembling, she was resolved. In her hand, she clutched a printed photo, a close-up of the red surveillance light blinking above her bed. Proof. Exposure. Betrayal. The receptionist tried to intercept her. "Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Kirk is in a meeting." "Not anymore," Loretta snapped, her voice cutting through the pristine quiet. She strode past the desk, heels biting into marble, and pushed open the double doors to Kirk's private office. The man himself looked up from a stack of documents, composed as always, as though interruptions were part of his routine. He didn't even flinch when she threw the photo onto his desk. It skidded across the surface, landing inches from his hands. "Would you like to explain that?" she said, her voice low, taut with fury. Kirk studied the photo, then looked back up at her, his expression maddeningly calm. "You found it." "Don't play games with me," Loretta said. "You had cameras in my apartment. Watching me. Listening. What the hell was that, Cardone? Another test." For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, with infuriating composure, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "Yes." The single word hit her like a slap. He continued, his tone precise and detached. "I needed to see how you behaved when you thought no one was watching. Integrity isn't proven in conversation. It's proven in solitude." Solitude. Her voice cracked with disbelief. "That wasn't solitude, that was violation. You invaded my home, my privacy, everything I am, because you wanted data on my soul." Kirk's eyes flickered, not guilt, but something close to regret. "It wasn't personal." Loretta laughed bitterly. "Everything you do is personal. You just hide it behind business suits and ethics you make up as you go." Silence thickened between them, sharp enough to cut through glass. Finally, she said it, the truth she'd been holding since that night in the penthouse when she'd called about the wallet. "You planted it, didn't you?" she whispered. Kirk's expression didn't change. "Yes. I left it there deliberately." She froze. "You what?" "I wanted to see who would find it," he said, "and what they would do. You were the first in years who did the right thing." The world tilted for a moment. Loretta felt something inside her twist, the betrayal mixing with understanding, the anger colliding with the faintest trace of pity. "So that's all I am to you," she said quietly. "A lab rat who passed your moral experiment." Kirk stood, his height shadowing her across the desk. "You're more than that, Loretta. You've proven more. That's why you're still here." "Not anymore." He blinked, startled. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I quit," she said, her tone steady. "Effective immediately." He exhaled slowly, as though absorbing the words one by one. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," she said, turning toward the door. "But at least it'll be my regret." She didn't wait for him to answer. The elevator doors closed behind her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she felt something like freedom, raw, cold, unsteady freedom. That night, her apartment was quiet. Too quiet. No cameras blinked. No red lights glowed. She'd unplugged everything that could possibly watch or listen. Yet the silence was heavier than ever. She sat by the window, staring out at the city, its endless hum of motion and wealth and lies. She wondered if Kirk was somewhere out there watching her anyway, through people, through systems, through invisible strings she couldn't see but could still feel. A knock came at the door. Loretta froze. Her first instinct was fear, a physical chill that crept up her spine. Slowly, she stood and approached the door. When she opened it, no one was there. Only an envelope. Thick. Unmarked. She brought it inside cautiously and set it on the table. Her fingers hesitated before sliding it open. Inside were blueprints. Architectural blueprints, beautifully detailed drawings of a housing complex. Affordable homes. Wide open spaces. Design notes written in her own handwriting. At the top corner, in elegant black ink, was a label. Rodriguez Housing Initiative. Her breath hitched. How could he have? Then she saw the small note attached, written in that same careful, unhurried script. Your vision deserves more than survival. C.K. Loretta sank into the chair. The papers trembled in her hands. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of, her designs, made real, funded, legitimized. Proof that he'd not only been watching her, but listening. And yet, it didn't feel like kindness. It felt like surrender. Tears welled in her eyes, not from gratitude, not from anger, but from the unbearable confusion of both. She pressed the note to her chest, whispering to no one, "Why can't you just let me be free?" The city lights blurred behind her tears, turning the skyline into streaks of gold and shadow. Somewhere out there, she knew, Cardone Kirk was watching, but not through cameras anymore. Through memory. Through obsession. Through something neither of them dared to name. Loretta sat in the dark until dawn, the blueprint spread around her like wings she was too afraid to use. They say privacy is freedom, until someone powerful decides it's optional. Would you even know if your opportunity was just a test? Subscribe now, because the most dangerous stories aren't fiction. They're the ones that start with good intentions and end with invisible chains. The storm came in quiet first, snow falling in slow spirals outside the glass tower of Kirk Enterprises, soft enough to look harmless. But by the time night fell, the city was buried under white, and the wind howled through the skyline like something alive. Loretta was still in the building, going through her last files. She'd come to retrieve the blueprints she'd left behind when she quit, intending to take them home for her own future plans. The office floors were empty. Even security had gone home hours ago. Except for one man. Cardone Kirk's light was still on. She could see the faint glow from under his door as she stepped into the silent corridor. The sound of the storm pressed against the glass windows behind her, a deep, constant roar. She told herself she'd just grab her things and leave. But curiosity had always been her weakness. So, she hesitated. Then she knocked. No answer. She turned the handle slightly. The office door swung open. Cardone Kirk sat at his desk, the skyline stretching behind him, the world beyond blurred white with snow. His posture was slumped, uncharacteristically undone. The ever-present precision in his movements was gone. "Mr. Kirk." He looked up slowly. His face was pale, his eyes unfocused. "Loretta." "You shouldn't still be here," she said softly, stepping in. "They said the storm's shutting down power grids across half the city." He smiled faintly, his voice low. "I own half the city, Ms. Rodriguez. I assumed it would wait for me." She was about to respond when the lights flickered, once, twice, and died completely. Darkness swallowed the room. The hum of the HVAC stopped. The monitors blinked out. Only the faint blue glow from the city filtered through the windows, dim and ghostly. "Kirk!" she called. There was a faint sound, a chair scraping, then a heavy thud. "Cardone." Loretta's heart lurched. She moved fast, guided by instinct. He was on the floor beside the desk, unconscious, his body limp and cold. Hey, stay with me." She knelt, checking his pulse with trembling fingers. Faint, but steady. Dehydration, fatigue, stress. He'd been working himself into collapse. "Damn you," she muttered under her breath. "Even your body doesn't know when to quit." She dragged him toward the couch near the wall of windows. The snow outside painted shifting light across his face, making him look almost human, vulnerable, even. She covered him with his coat, then found a small bottle of water on his desk and coaxed it to his lips when he stirred. "Easy," she whispered. He blinked up at her slowly. "Loretta." "Yeah, it's me." He looked confused. "Why are you still here?" "I could ask you the same thing," she said softly. For a long moment, they said nothing. The wind screamed beyond the glass, and the city below lay buried and powerless. Two people, alone at the top of the world, with no one left to perform for. Kirk exhaled shakily. "You shouldn't have come back." "Maybe I shouldn't have," she said. "But here we are." He tried to sit up. "You shouldn't see me like this." "Human?" she asked. He met her gaze, something flickering there, a lifetime of armor cracking just a little. "Weak." Loretta shook her head. "You're not weak, Cardone. You're just tired of pretending you aren't." He closed his eyes, his breathing uneven. You think I enjoy testing people? Watching? Measuring every word, every move. I think you don't know how to do anything else. That broke something. He turned toward her, his voice lower now, frayed at the edges. You don't understand. I learned young that trust gets you killed. My brother taught me that. I built everything I have from the ashes of betrayal. He looked away, eyes lost somewhere beyond the glass. He sold me out to a rival investor. Wiped out our family name. I rebuilt it alone. I stopped believing in people that night. The storm outside seemed to echo his words, a soundless violence against the glass. So the tests, she said quietly, they're how you protect yourself. He nodded weakly. The tests were the only way I knew how to trust. Loretta didn't respond right away. She just watched him. The man everyone feared looked suddenly smaller, his control gone, his voice trembling like someone who'd finally run out of armor. Then maybe, she said, you've been passing the wrong tests. Kirk's eyes lifted to hers, glassy and uncertain. What does that mean? It means that trust isn't proven in how people perform under pressure, she said softly. It's in what you let yourself risk when you stop controlling everything. He let out a breath that sounded halfway to a laugh. You make it sound simple. It's not. But it's real. For a long time, there was only the storm and the sound of their breathing. Finally, he said quietly, you make me want to stop. Loretta froze. The words lingered in the air, fragile, almost frightened. He looked at her, truly looked, without calculation or judgment. You make me want to stop testing. Stop searching for deceit in everyone. Stop being me. She didn't know what to say to that. So she didn't. She just reached out and took his hand, steady, deliberate, not as employee or project or test subject, but as a person. They sat like that until the storm began to ease and faint light returned to the windows. When Kirk finally drifted into exhausted sleep, Loretta rose quietly and moved to his desk. His laptop sat dark, half open, its power light flickering from a backup generator. She hesitated, then touched the keyboard. The screen glowed weakly to life, showing folder after folder of security archives, dates, times, recordings. Her name labeled across dozens of them. Her throat tightened. This was the control he clung to, the web that defined him. Her fingers hovered over the delete key. Then she pressed it. Each file vanished, one by one. When the last folder disappeared, she whispered, almost to herself, now you can rest, Cardone. The snow fell lighter now, the city beginning to wake beneath them. Loretta stood by the window, the reflection of her face overlapping his sleeping form in the glass, two halves of the same truth. One had built walls to survive. The other had learned to walk through them. And for the first time since she'd met him, she felt something new. Not fear. Not anger. But mercy. Ever thought you were free, only to realize every step had been mapped? Control doesn't always come with chains. Sometimes, it looks like care. Subscribe now, before the next storm shows you how easily trust becomes the most dangerous test of all. 3 months had passed since the storm. 3 months since Loretta Rodriguez walked out of Kirk Enterprises for the last time. No fanfare, no goodbye, just silence and the steady rhythm of her own footsteps echoing through the marble lobby. Now she woke before sunrise every morning in her modest downtown office, the walls lined with sketches and blueprints. The name on the door read Rodriguez Design Studio. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. The hum of her drafting tablet filled the space, accompanied by the faint sounds of early construction outside. Her first small project, an affordable housing block for low-income families, was finally underway. It was a dream she'd once thought would take a lifetime. Now she was building it brick by brick, funded partly through grants, partly through her stubborn refusal to quit. But even as the blue lines formed under her stylus, she sometimes caught herself looking at the skyline through the office window. The gleaming spire of Kirk Tower was visible in the distance, a cold, perfect monument to the world she'd escaped. Rumors had followed her since leaving. The cleaner who became the CEO's mistress. The assistant who blackmailed her way out with hush money. The woman who broke the untouchable Cardone Kirk. She'd stopped reading the articles weeks ago. The truth was quieter than gossip could ever be. Her phone buzzed once, interrupting her thoughts. A message. No name, just a number she hadn't seen in months. "I'd like to see you. Regarding a proposal." Loretta stared at it for a long time before replying with 2 words. "Where and when?" The next day, she stood in front of the glass house, a cafe tucked beneath the very building she'd once cleaned. Snowflakes drifted lazily past the tall windows as she stepped inside. Cardone Kirk was already there. No bodyguards. No watchful assistants. Just him, sitting at a corner table with a folder in front of him. He rose when she approached, still immaculate, still calm, but the arrogance she once associated with him had softened into something quieter. "Loretta." He said her name like an acknowledgement, not a claim. "Mr. Kirk." He gestured to the seat across from him. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure either," she said, taking the chair. A brief silence hung between them, filled only by the soft jazz humming through the speakers and the hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter. He opened the folder and slid a stack of plans across the table. Community housing. Low cost, sustainable materials. Solar integration. "You've been working on something like this, haven't you?" Loretta's heart tightened. The sketches looked familiar, too familiar. He'd found her drafts. She met his gaze. "How did you get these?" He didn't flinch. "Public grant proposals. You submitted them last month. So you still watch me." He exhaled softly. "No. I just listen now." Loretta leaned back, wary but curious. "What do you want, Cardone?" "I want to fund it," he said simply. "Completely. On your terms. The land's already secured. I want you to lead the design." She studied him carefully. "And what's the condition this time?" "Another test." He shook his head. "No tests. No strings." "You don't do things without reason," she said, her tone cool. "Why this project? Why me?" Kirk looked down at the table for a moment, as if weighing his words. When he looked up again, his voice was quieter, almost uncertain. "Because you were right," he said. "All my life I've tested people to see who would stay, but it turns out the only person worth trusting is the one who left anyway." The words hit her harder than she expected. He continued, eyes steady on hers. "You passed mine, Loretta. I'm still trying to pass yours." For the first time, she didn't feel like prey to his power or student to his wealth. He wasn't the unreachable man behind the glass tower anymore. Just a man trying to rebuild something invisible inside himself. She looked down at the proposal again. The project could change lives. Hers, her community's, maybe even his. But more than that, it symbolized something else. Partnership, not ownership. "This time," she said softly, closing the folder, "no conditions." Kirk nodded. "No tests." They sat in silence for a moment, the snow blurring the city outside into a wash of white and silver. When he finally reached across the table, his hand brushed hers, gentle, not claiming. A gesture that asked, not demanded. "Do you ever regret calling me that night?" he asked quietly. Loretta smiled faintly, her eyes meeting his. "Sometimes. But then I remember, that was the night my life stopped belonging to fear." He nodded slowly, as if that truth settled something in him too. They stayed like that, two people who had once been divided by class, by control, by a test neither truly understood, now sitting as equals at a table neither owned. Outside, the storm clouds began to part, sunlight breaking through the skyline. Loretta stood first, tucking the folder under her arm. "You'll hear from my team about the next steps," she said, professional but warm. He rose too, the corner of his mouth curving into a small, rare smile. "Loretta, thank you." She paused by the door. "For what?" "For not letting me win." Her laugh was soft, genuine. "You never could." And with that, she left him standing there, sunlight spilling across the table between them, bright, clean, and untested. Some people never realize the real test ended when they walked away. Loretta did, and she found freedom on the other side. If you'd rather face truth than spend your life wondering what if, subscribe now, before the next story hits closer to your own test than you think. 1 year later, the city skyline looked different. Where glass towers once stood like monuments to profit, a new shape rose among them, smaller, warmer, built with curved lines and wide terraces designed for light and air. The plaque at its base read, "The Rodriguez Foundation for Sustainable Living." It wasn't Kirk Tower's mirror-polished arrogance or a monument of steel screaming for attention. It was quiet, functional, human, the kind of structure that whispered purpose instead of shouting wealth. And that was exactly how Loretta wanted it. She stood on the top floor that morning, wind tugging gently at her curls as she looked out across the city. The early sun glinted off her building's solar panels, catching on the low-income neighborhoods sprawled in the distance, the ones she had once cleaned offices to afford. Now she was designing them. Her office buzzed softly behind her. Teams of young architects and interns moved around tables covered in sketches and digital models. The new branch of the firm, Rodriguez and Kirk Architects, had grown faster than anyone expected. They built for the overlooked, housing, community centers, eco-schools. Kirk's funding had started it, but the principles were hers. Every decision passed through her moral compass first. Fair wages. Affordable rent. No exploitation. For every glass skyscraper Kirk's company once raised, she now built 10 homes for people who had never imagined owning a key. Behind her, the office door opened. She didn't have to turn to know it was him. Cardone Kirk had changed, too. He traded the cold armor of his three-piece suits for something simpler, rolled-up sleeves, an open collar, a quiet smile. The man who once orchestrated human loyalty like a stock exchange now walked slower, spoke softer, and smiled with something almost like peace. "Still watching the skyline?" he asked. Loretta smiled faintly. "It used to mock me," she said. "Now it reminds me why we build." He stepped beside her, their reflections overlapping in the glass. For a long time, they simply looked out, not needing to fill the silence. It wasn't the silence of surveillance anymore. It was calm. Mutual. Equal. "I had a call with the board this morning," Kirk said finally. "They're still asking why I'm pouring millions into affordable housing instead of expanding commercial properties." "And what did you tell them?" "That I finally found something worth investing in." She turned her head toward him, brow raised. "You mean people?" "I mean you," he said, then caught himself, smiling wryly. "And yes, people too." Loretta laughed under her breath, shaking her head. "You're learning." Slowly, he admitted. Their partnership was something fragile but real, not the obsessive control of their beginning, not the wary admiration that had replaced it. What existed between them now was an equilibrium. She led, he funded. She challenged, he listened. There were no contracts written in invisible ink, no conditions buried under charm. Just trust, the one thing neither had believed they'd ever find. A soft chime echoed across the office. Loretta's assistant poked her head in. "Ms. Rodriguez, the press team's downstairs. They're ready for the ribbon cutting." "Be right there," Loretta said, then turned back to Kirk. "You coming?" He hesitated, glancing toward the skyline. "This is your day." "Then it's ours," she said, her tone firm but gentle. They descended together, not side by side like a couple seeking attention, but like two architects unveiling what they had built in more than concrete. Outside, cameras clicked and murmurs rose. Loretta took the ceremonial scissors, pausing as she caught sight of a small group of children standing at the front, kids from the neighborhood who would soon live in these homes. Their eyes glimmered with hope she recognized all too well. She cut the ribbon cleanly. Cheers erupted. Reporters leaned forward, expecting a speech. But Loretta only smiled, stepping to the microphone. "This building isn't about architecture," she began softly. "It's about integrity, about remembering where you come from even after you've built something new." Her gaze drifted toward Kirk at the back of the crowd. "It's about understanding that sometimes, the people who test you aren't trying to break you. They're trying to see if you're real enough to rebuild them too." The audience fell silent, not because they understood, but because her words carried the kind of gravity that didn't need explaining. Kirk looked down, his hands folded, a faint smile playing on his lips. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Loretta found herself standing beneath the newly cut ribbon, tracing the engraved name on the plaque. Rodriguez Foundation. Kirk joined her quietly. "You did it." "We did it," she corrected. He nodded then, after a pause. "Do you ever think about that night? The wallet?" She chuckled softly. "Sometimes. Mostly when I realize how close I came to throwing it away." He looked at her, eyes full of quiet reflection. "You mean the wallet?" She met his gaze. "No. The coal." A beat of silence passed, thick with memory and gratitude. Then she smiled, not the cautious one she'd worn for so long, but a full, luminous smile that reached her eyes. "You know what's funny, Cardone? You tested honesty and found love. I tested power and found peace." He tilted his head, the faintest trace of wonder in his expression. "Turns out," she finished, "we were both just searching for something real." The wind lifted the edge of the ribbon, sending it fluttering like a flag in the morning light. In a world obsessed with power, one act of honesty built an empire no money could buy. Not of steel or glass, but of trust. Because sometimes, the real foundation isn't what you stand on. It's who stands with you.